The story opened in the house of Count Lordberg in the Nozem Principality. Melkus Lordberg, the protagonist, was being beaten by his father, Zahak Lordberg, the vice-captain of the Lordberg Kingdom Knights. Zahak insisted that any talent other than the Sword Saint was worthless, and he declared that receiving any other gift was a disgrace to the Lordberg name. In this world, children were granted miraculous powers by the gods when they turned 15. Some gifts made daily life easier, while others were meant for combat. Within the Lordberg Earl family, only one gift had ever manifested: the Sword Saint, a power known as the strongest for sharply enhancing precision and strength in swordsmanship. Zahak had told Melkus from childhood that he absolutely had to receive this gift, and Melkus had endured harsh training just to follow in his father's footsteps. However, when Melkus finally turned 15, the appraiser informed them that his gift was something called Origin Magic. Zahak had never even heard the term. When the appraiser explained that Origin Magic was the source of all magic, and that it allowed the user to permanently reproduce any magic they had witnessed and wield it freely, Zahak dismissed the description as nonsense. Melkus tried to reassure him, saying he understood that if he mastered it, it would become powerful. He asked the appraiser to confirm it, but the appraiser admitted he didn't know anything more. Despite years of experience, this was the first time he had ever seen such a gift. Melkus was stunned by this, and Zahak immediately declared that it was a useless talent. He said he was disappointed in Melkus, reminding him that he had once been praised as a prodigy, but had now become a disgrace. The appraiser then suggested they proceed to Castor's appraisal. Castor was Melkus's younger twin brother. Until now, Castor had repeatedly skipped training, and Zahak had scolded him for it, even ordering Melkus to stay away from him because he considered Castor a dropout. At this moment, Zahak said he no longer expected anything from Castor and claimed that the Lordberg family was finished. Then the appraiser revealed that Castor's gift was the Sword Saint. Zahak's expression changed instantly. He embraced Castor, praising him, saying he had done well and was truly worthy of inheriting the house of Count Lordberg. Castor, surprised that he had surpassed Melkus simply by receiving the ultimate gift, grew confident. He grabbed his sword, eager to try his new power, and prepared to attack Melkus immediately. He struck at Melkus, who managed to block the attack, but Melkus's sword shattered on impact. Castor laughed at this. He said that the older brother he had never once defeated in training was nothing but trash now. Melkus could see Castor drowning in the intoxication of power. Their father then kissed Castor on the cheek, calling him magnificent and comparing him directly to Melkus. Zahak told Melkus to leave the house and never show his face again. Castor added that if Melkus, who had once belonged to a count's family, ended up begging on the streets, it would only bring more shame to the Lordberg name. Zahak agreed and mentioned a tiny territory in the remote eastern backcountry called Soldiery Village, a place they had already left in the hands of a deputy lord. He told Melkus to go there, play lord quietly, and live out his life away from them. After some time, Melkus traveled toward the remote domain, sitting quietly in the carriage and wondering why everything had turned out this way. He questioned how his father could have done something so cruel. His thoughts drifted to a memory from when he was 6 years old, back when their house had caught fire. Everyone had panicked, wondering where he was. Melkus had been trapped inside the vault room, crying helplessly and believing he would burn to death. At that moment, Zahak had appeared, relieved that Melkus was alive. He had rushed in and saved him. When Melkus asked how he had known he was in that room, Zahak, who had originally been trying to save the vault, covered up the truth and told him it was simply the power of a father's love. As a child, Melkus had believed it wholeheartedly. He had admired his father, convinced that Zahak was a kind and thoughtful man, and believed that his father always had a hidden plan. He had vowed to uncover Zahak's true intentions one day and live up to his expectations. Melkus had idealized him deeply. As he traveled, Melkus thought about what he should do now, and his thoughts returned to his gift. He recalled the description mentioning that he could restore to a perfect state, though he still didn't understand what that meant. Just then, he heard something in the distance. He stepped out of the carriage and told the coachman to wait while he headed deeper into the forest. There he found another cart under attack by goblins. Seeing that the attackers were too many for the soldiers to handle alone, he rushed forward to help. Melkus unleashed his sword technique, Comet Slash, and destroyed the goblins in a single strike. The soldiers were stunned. They remarked that despite being just a boy, his skill rivaled that of a mid-range knight. They asked who he was. Before anyone could recover, a giant minotaur appeared. Melkus knew that this was a monster that normally required dozens of elite knights to defeat. The soldiers shouted for the passengers to run. The Minotaur's attack shattered all of their swords. One of the soldiers attempted to cast fire magic using an enchantment, but the small fireball he produced had no effect. At that moment, Malchus remembered his gift. He knew he could reproduce any magic he had witnessed in its complete form. When the soldier asked if he could use fire magic, Malchus admitted that magic was only theory for him, but he reminded himself that origin magic was the source of all magic and allowed him to perfectly restore what he had seen. He formed an enormous fireball, shocking everyone present. They looked at the magic circle, unable to believe something so large and complex could exist. Malchus released the spell, and the massive fireball obliterated the Minotaur and devastated the surrounding area. Everyone stared in disbelief at the destructive power. Malchus then recalled his lessons in magic studies. To use magic, one needed both a magic circle and a chant, and drawing a magic circle was extremely difficult. Even a master could only channel about 10% of the mana used. He remembered asking his teacher what would happen if someone could draw a perfect magic circle. His teacher had explained that such a person could pour in all of their mana without needing to chant. At that moment, Malchus understood. His origin magic allowed him to recreate magic in its perfect form, and that meant he could use every bit of mana again. Malchus remembered how his father had called his gift worthless, even though origin magic was far too powerful to be dismissed. He realized that it was a gift beyond even the Sword Saint, and he wondered why his father would disown him over something so extraordinary. Behind him, one of the soldiers asked who he was. Malchus introduced himself as Malchus of the Count Lordberg family. A girl in the cart heard this and immediately jumped out, asking if he had really said Malchus. He recognized her as Mariel. She realized he was the one fighting earlier and expressed relief that he was safe. When Malchus asked why she was there, she explained that she was moving to the same village. Mariel was the fourth princess of the Duchy of Lethartnausen. When he questioned why she would go to a remote place like that, she blushed and avoided giving him an answer. Malchus found himself thinking about everything that had been happening. He had always felt something was strange. His supposedly wise father had labeled him a failure without ever verifying the power of origin magic, his father's sudden coldness, and now even Mariel, the fiancée chosen for him by his parents, was heading to the same village. He had once believed his father wanted him to overcome hardship and become a true warrior, but all of this had been a misunderstanding. He had believed that his father understood the true strength of his gift from the start, and that Zahak thought Malchus was too immature to handle such power. He had convinced himself that his father wanted him to harden his heart, start from nothing, and train in a remote village. But the truth was far different. Zahak was simply a greedy fool who couldn't recognize real talent and had raised his son only for the benefit of the Count's house. Castor, too, was a small-minded boy who lost himself the moment he gained a little power. Malchus realized he had been deluded. He had believed his father wanted him to become a stronger warrior, that his father had sent Mariel to the village to support him, and that the goal was for him to bear the strongest gift and become a true man. He had even thought Mariel was helping him for that reason. Overwhelmed, he dropped to his knees and told Mariel that he would protect her. He thought to himself that allowing the fourth princess to be harmed would have been an unforgivable mistake. He promised that even if it cost him his life, he would defend her until the end, and never allow anyone to lay a hand on her. Mariel blushed deeply and insisted that they needed to hurry to Soldari village. She left, and Malchus assumed that his father wanted him to play the role of lord in that remote place, believing this entire situation was a trial meant to help him grow and develop the village. He convinced himself that he would turn the village into the most prosperous territory in the nation and prove himself a worthy man to his father. As they traveled, he wondered what kind of place Soldari village truly was. Meanwhile, in Soldari village, panic had already erupted. People were running through the streets, shouting that they could no longer live there. What had once been a promising territory was suddenly in grave danger. When Malchus and Mariel reached the village, they found people fleeing in panic. Mariel wondered aloud if something had happened, and Malchus replied that he would go check. Since it seemed dangerous, he asked her to wait inside the carriage. He stopped one of the fleeing villagers to ask what was going on. The villager, noticing he wasn't from the area, urged him to escape immediately. She explained that miasma was spreading, pouring out of a cave at the base of the mountain. She warned that anyone swallowed by it would die instantly. She also said that they had once sealed it with a giant boulder long ago, but that seal had somehow been broken. At that moment, Malchus heard a frantic man shouting that his daughter was still inside the village. Other villagers tried to restrain him, telling him it was already too late and asking if he intended to throw his life away as well. They insisted that they had no choice but to abandon the village entirely. Malchus rushed toward the danger. As the Lord, he felt he could not look away from a crisis like this, and he believed that with his fireball, he might manage to disperse the miasma long enough to create a window of safety. He noticed nearby flowers and leaves visibly decaying under its influence. Then he spotted a nun shielding a little girl with a purification spell, though at that rate she clearly wouldn't hold out for long. The nun looked at Melkus, and not knowing who he was, pleaded for him to take the child and run while she continued holding back the miasma. Melkus tried to insist that she would be harmed if she stayed, but the sister told him it didn't matter, explaining that she was the only one in the village capable of using holy magic. Struggling to maintain the barrier, she urged him to hurry and escape while she bought them time. Melkus observed her spell and instantly copied it in its complete form. He unleashed a massive holy technique that wiped out the miasma in one sweep. The sister stared in shock, and Melkus told her to take the child and run. He said he couldn't leave someone with that kind of resolve behind, and that he would deal with the miasma himself. Obeying his words, she fled with the child, shaken by the realization that he had used the exact same magic as her, and with overwhelming power. Melkus then noticed that the miasma was endless. He understood he had to destroy it at its source. He recalled that it originated from a cave at the mountain's foot and considered the timing, realizing that the moment the village received a new lord, the miasma that had been suppressed for so long suddenly erupted. He wondered if that could truly be a coincidence. When he reached the source, he found goblins attacking a man in armor. Melkus cut down the monsters with a single swift strike and destroyed the miasma at its origin, cleansing the area completely. The armored man rose and thanked him, but Melkus recognized him immediately. This man had been hired by Melkus' father Zahak, who had ordered him to travel to Soldari village and break the seal on the great boulder to release the miasma. The man explained that this incident was meant to ensure that Melkus would never become a lord. The man explained that he had heard Lord Zahak was the one who had appointed Melkus as the feudal lord of the village. Zahak had shouted at him to simply carry out the task. Melkus noticed that the man's armor bore the Lordberg family crest and had been crafted to resist miasma. He recognized him as Masaka and immediately assumed this entire event had been another trial set by his father. He believed Zahak wanted him to rise to the occasion and protect the villagers. He told Masaka that he understood he had been the one to release the suppressed miasma and asked him to explain further, but Masaka, frightened, fled from him instead. Melkus decided that he would report his success to his father. He observed that the cave had a large open space within it. When he stepped inside, he discovered it filled with magic stones. These stones were special minerals that naturally stored magical power and were often used to craft magical tools. In places where miasma tended to accumulate, magic stones also formed easily, and with miasma this dense, the quantity before him made perfect sense. He assumed his father had predicted all of this and had known that mining and selling these stones would create a new industry for the village. Convinced that this was the true purpose behind the trial of eliminating the miasma, he lay down on the ground and admired how incredible his father seemed, though of course, all of this was a complete misunderstanding. As he lay there, he dramatically overestimated his father's intentions. When he returned to the villagers, they rejoiced to see him safe and thanked him for risking his life to save them. Mariel ran to him and hugged him tightly, and Melkus apologized for making her worry. She noticed a beautiful stone in his hand and asked about it. Melkus admitted he had almost forgotten and announced to everyone that he had discovered a massive supply of magic stones that could now be mined from the cave at the mountain's base. He told them this would become the village's new industry and that the miasma would no longer erupt. The sister approached and asked who he was. Melkus introduced himself as Melkus Lordberg and explained that from that day forward he had been entrusted as the village's lord. The villagers were astonished that the person who had saved them was also their new lord. One villager expressed confidence that Melkus would improve their lives, while another doubted that someone so young could handle the responsibilities of a lord, pointing out that the position required knowledge of politics and economics as well. Mariel then stepped forward and reassured everyone. She introduced herself as the fourth princess of the Nozin Principality and Melkus's fiancée, and said she would support him. As a member of the royal family, she explained that she had received thorough education from childhood, and that they could entrust politics and domain administration to her. The villagers were stunned to learn she was the fourth princess, and she gently told them they didn't need to be overly formal around her. Melkus quietly reflected that Mariel might appear a bit tomboyish at times, but she was incredibly intelligent. He told her she was truly dependable. Mariel blushed at his words, and the villagers cheered, saying that with Lord Melkus and Lady Mariel guiding them, their village would be safe. As they celebrated, Melkis promised himself that as their lord, he would work hard to meet his father's expectations, silently asking his father to watch over him. At the same time, Zahak was furious that Melkis had survived the entire incident. A little earlier, right after Melkis' expulsion, Zahak had headed to the royal castle after being summoned by His Majesty. The king had told him earlier that he would soon be granted the rank of Marques, and Zahak assumed the summons was related to that. He believed the king must have been acknowledging his accomplishments as vice-captain. Castor, feeling nervous inside the royal palace, had been warned by Zahak to behave himself. Zahak had confidently told Castor that he would likely become Lady Mariel's fiancé that day. Castor had asked if Mariel was the busty princess, and had gotten excited. Zahak had assumed that the king intended to declare that Melkis, who had failed to awaken the gift of the Sword Saint, was unfit to be Mariel's fiancé, and that Castor was the rightful match for the king's daughter. Castor's excitement only grew, and the two of them arrived at the royal castle in high spirits. Inside, King Aloysius Redheart of the Nozen Kingdom immediately demanded an explanation for why Melkis had been made the lord of a remote village. He informed them that Mariel had even followed Melkis all the way there. Zahak and Castor were stunned and asked why Mariel would ever do such a thing. The king told them the reason was completely obvious. She loved Melkis deeply. Zahak, shocked, said he had believed their engagement was something forced onto the two of them by His Majesty, and that Lady Mariel had opposed it. The king clarified that Mariel had only been hiding her embarrassment at the time. He explained that it wasn't him who pushed the engagement. It had been Mariel herself. He admitted that he had actually been against marrying his daughter to someone from a mere count's family, but Mariel had cried and insisted she wanted no one but Melkis. Zahak then said he had assumed the king desired Melkis because of the Sword Saint gift, a skill said to appear only within the Lordberg bloodline. The king denied this entirely. He reminded Zahak that as the king, he was not someone who personally charged into battle, so he had no reason to pursue a combat-focused ability. Zahak was embarrassed by this correction. The king then revealed that he had once enjoyed tea together with Mariel and Melkis. Zahak was startled to hear this. The king explained that during that meeting, he had understood exactly why Mariel had fallen for Melkis. The king praised Melkis warmly, saying he had been honest, broad-hearted, and genuinely admirable. Even the mock battle Melkis had performed with the knight had been excellent. He continued praising Melkis, saying that his swordsmanship, archery, horsemanship, martial arts skills, and etiquette had all been impeccable. Melkis had shown diligence and talent in everything he did, and even during that meeting, he had accidentally addressed the king as father-in-law. Both he and Mariel had blushed at that moment, while Melkis apologized for the slip, saying he had been disrespectful. The king had reassured him that it was perfectly fine. Remembering all of this made the king genuinely happy. However, he explained that when the question of marrying Melkis to Mariel arose, Melkis' status had presented a problem. That was why the king had even considered granting the Lordberg family the rank of Marquis. Zahak was stunned to realize that the title had not been because of his own merit, but entirely thanks to Melkis. The king returned to the main issue and asked again why Melkis had been made the lord of a rural village. He wondered if it had been because Melkis' gift at the age of 15 had turned out differently from what everyone had expected, leading to his expulsion from the family. Zahak tried to cover it up, saying that Melkis had only been sent there for a brother. He claimed Melkis had been training desperately every day, but after receiving such a useless gift, he had become terribly discouraged. Zahak said he believed a peaceful environment would help him recover, so he had given him a year off. The king was surprised to hear that Melkis had been granted time off, but said there was certainly nothing wrong with resting in the countryside. He told Zahak that this made him see him in a new light. Zahak failed to understand what he meant, and the king explained further. When someone was feeling defeated, rest was indeed the best remedy. He added that he had honestly expected Zahak to say something harsh, such as Melkis being a disgrace who would bring down the prestigious Lordberg house, leading to his exile. Zahak covered up again, saying that he could never treat his beloved son like that. The king then stated firmly that if Zahak truly had exiled Melkis, he would have stripped Zahak of his rank and territory and cast him out as a commoner. Zahak only laughed at this. Later, when Zahak returned to his chambers, he was furious. He declared that no matter what happened, they had to bring Melkis back. Castor pointed out that it would be difficult after having kicked him out. They couldn't simply beg him to return. Zahak said it would be easier if the village just disappeared, because then Melkis would have no choice but to come home. He said that an incident would occur in the village. Melkis would fail to become its lord, and that would be the moment Zahak would appear to deliver his message. The message would be that despite Melkus being born with a useless gift, he was still Zahak's flesh and blood, so he would be granted the special privilege of returning to the Count's household. Castor understood the plan immediately and said he would make preparations. Zahak laughed proudly, unaware that he had just made the worst possible decision. If he had swallowed his pride, spoken honestly, and apologized, everything could have been resolved peacefully. Instead, he had unknowingly invited a grave future crisis. Back in Soldari village, Melkus told Mariel he was heading to the Adventurers Guild. He explained that he had gone around speaking with the villagers. One villager had told him the well had dried up, and they could no longer draw water. Another mentioned that the fields were too small, making it impossible to grow enough vegetables. Someone else shared a rumor that a terrifying dragon lived in the mountain behind the village, leaving them constantly worried about an attack. A man explained that their houses were falling apart, and although they wanted to rebuild, everyone was struggling just to survive, so they couldn't afford repairs. A mother said they were running out of firewood and might not survive the winter. A child, with innocence and longing, confessed that he wished he could eat meat. Melkus had looked at the meager meals they were eating and could tell their health would deteriorate if nothing changed. He concluded that although there were countless problems, the first priority had to be eliminating the monsters. Melkus said that they never knew when monsters might strike the village. He had heard that this settlement was attacked often, so he decided his first step should be to observe how the adventurers handled these threats. Mariel understood and told him to take care. She mentioned that she was busy with the move, but since the knights were guarding her, everything was fine. Melkus knew adventurers as people who made their livelihood by slaying monsters or collecting valuable materials in dangerous areas. Their work was overseen and assigned by the Adventurers Guild, but when he arrived, he found the guild building in an extremely worn-down state. Inside, he was greeted by the man who had earlier thanked him for saving his daughter. The man introduced himself as Timorat, the one in charge of organizing the adventures there. Other adventurers asked Melkus why someone like him had business in such a rough place. Melkus explained that he was conducting an inspection and that the next time monsters attacked, he wanted them to take him along. The adventurers were baffled and immediately refused, saying the front lines were far too dangerous. They insisted he stay somewhere safe. Melkus replied that he couldn't do that, since he needed to conduct the inspection personally. Timorat bowed deeply to him and said that if Melkus had not intervened earlier, he would have lost his precious daughter. Their battles against monsters were always life-or-death struggles, and Timorat admitted he had no confidence he could protect Melkus. Because of that, he could not allow his benefactor to put himself in harm's way. Melkus then revealed his sword and stated that he had more than enough strength to defend himself. But Timorat continued to plead with him. Melkus wondered why they were all so worried about his safety and assumed his father must have instructed them to look after him. Thinking that his father was being overprotective, he felt slightly embarrassed. Timorat then reached into his chest and said that if Melkus insisted, he would have to prove his strength beyond any doubt. He brought out some practice weapons and declared that if Melkus lost, he would have to give up the inspection entirely. Melkus agreed, and the two of them stepped outside to prepare for their practice match. A crowd gathered around them. Timorat explained the rules. The first person to land a strike would win, and even a pulled or controlled strike would count. The villagers cheered loudly for Timorat, all of them wanting to protect their lord. The match began, and Timorat immediately swung his axe with great force. Melkus managed to block it. He noted Timorat's tremendous strength. Timorat praised Melkus in return, saying that his swordsmanship was truly remarkable. He said he hadn't expected Melkus to surpass his power. Timorat was considered the strongest man in the village, using sheer skill alone. Timorat warned that he still had something up his sleeve. He then used magic to enhance his physical abilities. The crowd reacted, saying the match was already decided. Timorat's power, speed, and endurance had all doubled, and in that state he was considered invincible, someone no opponent could stop. Timorat launched a series of fierce attacks, and Melkus deflected each one. Then Melkus copied the enhancement magic and used the force boost technique. This spell allowed him to vanish for a moment and reappear with a sudden burst of power, striking Timorat so forcefully that Timorat's axe was knocked from his hands. Melkus asked Timorat if he would allow the inspection. Timorat responded that it was not possible yet, explaining that at this stage, they could not guarantee it was absolutely safe for Melkus to visit the site. The other adventurers then readied their weapons. They declared that they would have to make their lord give up on the inspection no matter what, insisting that everything they were doing was for Melkus' safety. They told him not to take it the wrong way, and then they all charged at him. Melkus thought to himself that it sounded exactly like a villain line. The adventurers apologized as they attacked, saying they were acting this way because they cared about him. They rushed him all at once, but he defeated them easily, leaving them apologizing for having underestimated him. Melkus then asked if this meant they would now approve the inspection. The adventurers laughed, admitting they had never imagined their lord would be so strong. At that moment, the sister from earlier arrived and greeted everyone. She introduced herself as Lily, and Timerat explained to Melkus that she had been helping them with her healing magic. She healed the bruises on the adventurers, and Melkus immediately copied her healing magic. He thought that with this, if anything ever happened to the villagers, he would be able to heal them himself. The sister suddenly began praying in front of him, and he asked her what she was doing. Lily explained that the Holy Scripture stated that when mankind fell into dire straits, the lady goddess Arcadias would send forth an apostle of salvation. She believed that Melkus was truly a messenger of God. Melkus tried to correct her, telling her she was mistaken, but Lily said she had felt it from the very first moment she saw him, saying that every time she spoke his name, her chest burned and her heart pounded. To her, this was undeniable proof that Melkus was a special being. Melkus attempted to clear the misunderstanding again, insisting she was wrong. However, the other villagers and adventurers overheard and immediately agreed with Lily, assuming this must be the source of his strength. Melkus tried to stop them, telling them not to overreact. He told Lily that her symptoms might simply be a kind of heart condition and that she should get it checked by a doctor. Lily rejected that, saying Melkus was without a doubt a messenger of Lord Arcadias. Seeing this, Melkus could only think that misunderstandings were truly troublesome. Timerat then moved on and introduced the village, showing him around and explaining that the village was particularly prone to monster attacks. He pointed at the wall and explained that their crops were destroyed easily and that danger came both day and night, leaving everyone living in constant fear. He added that the defensive walls helped, at least as much as they could. Melkus examined the broken, messy walls and said they were unreliable. Timerat explained that monsters kept breaking them down, and just the other day a section had collapsed again. Just then, shouting echoed from nearby. When they followed the voices, they saw two people in a heated argument. One insisted that the price being demanded was not what they had agreed upon, while the other man told him to be quiet. The man claimed that with the wall damaged like this, they would not be able to patch up the holes without him. Lily explained that the arrogant man was the wall repairman. Since no one in their own village could fix the walls, they had to bring him in from another village on assignment. His payment was outrageous and his attitude terrible, but they had no choice. The old man finally agreed and said he would pay for the wall. The repairman accepted the payment and used earth magic to fix a portion of the wall. Melkus watched closely and copied the spell into his own skill set. The other villagers then questioned the repairman, asking why he had not repaired the wall completely. The repairman announced that from that point onward, he would charge triple the usual fee. The villagers grew furious, telling him not to mess with them and not to act so high and mighty. The repairman argued that he was doing them a favor by traveling all the way to this countryside. If they could not pay in cash, he said there was nothing he could do. He suddenly grabbed Lily inappropriately and said that the sister could always pay with her body instead. Lily managed to pull away, and Melkus immediately comforted her. She told the repairman not to insult her like that, but he told her not to talk back. He reminded everyone that without his earth magic, they would all be in trouble. He then added that he did not mind leaving, saying he did not have to concern himself with a village like this. Melkus stepped forward and told him that there would be no need for him to come anymore. Confused, the repairman demanded to know what he meant. Melkus then used earth magic to create a massive soil wall. Everyone stood in shock as it rose before their eyes, and the villagers asked what on earth this creation was. Melkus explained that he had simply tried making a wall with magic, but he had never expected something so enormous to appear. The villagers were amazed, but the repairman was stunned in disbelief. Timerat told the repairman that they no longer required his services and ordered him to go home. The repairman began begging, admitting that outside his own village, there was no wall repair work for him, since other villages already had their own earth mages. Lily said that with an attitude like his, it was natural that no one else would hire him. The villagers muttered that it served him right. Timerat added that if the man helped with farm work, he would not starve, and then dragged him away. Melkus then said it was time to begin his duties. The others asked what he meant, and Melkus told them that he planned to surround the entire village with this gigantic wall. He began generating the wall, and the villagers commented that even if a monster attacked now, the structure would not budge at all. They said there would no longer be any midnight panic from sudden raids. Lily pointed out that Melkus not only possessed healing magic, but could also use earth magic. Melkus explained that with the power of his gift, he could copy and use any spell he witnessed. Lily insisted that talent was bestowed by Lady Arcadia's, and the scriptures stated that when humanity faced a great crisis, the goddess granted a powerful gift to a chosen one with a mission, just like the hero who had defeated the demon tribe decades earlier and saved the world. She believed Melkus was the same, a messenger of God. After Melkus finished constructing the wall, they all climbed up. Timrat noted that if Melkus defeated the monsters approaching the village from atop the wall with his bow, he could easily acquire their materials. Another villager added that since they no longer needed healing potions, he was guaranteed to make a profit. Melkus thought to himself that the village was a wonderful place, filled with genuinely good people. As he looked out over the scenery from the top of the wall, he felt that even without the trial, he was glad he had come here. He wanted to enrich their lives and turn the village into an even better place. When he returned, he noticed that the house he had inherited from the former lord still had its lights on. Curious, he went inside and saw Mariel welcoming him home. He asked why she was inside his house, and Mariel realized she had forgotten to mention something important. She told him that she would be living there as well. Melkus said that he had never heard about this arrangement before. Mariel explained that since they were fiancés, there was nothing improper about it. Melkus tried to object, but Mariel added that they had not informed the king about them living together, so he needed to make sure to cover for her. Melkus thought nervously that if His Majesty found out, he would be absolutely furious. He wondered if this situation was some kind of trial for him. When they reached their room, they found two villagers nervously arguing. One villager apologized, saying his hand had slipped, and he had accidentally broken the bed. He promised Lady Mariel that he would arrange for a replacement immediately. Melkus assisted the villager and asked if he was all right. Mariel looked at the broken bed, then calmly said that since what was broken could not be helped, there was no need to rush and the villager could take his time with the replacement. Both the villagers and Melkus thought to themselves that Mariel was such a kind person, not voicing a single complaint. Mariel, meanwhile, encouraged herself internally, telling herself she could handle this and should simply let things flow naturally. She told Melkus that since the bed was broken, the only option left was for them to share one. They both lay down on the same bed, each of them blushing intensely. Melkus wondered if Mariel truly intended to sleep in the same bed as him. He tried to calm his heart, thinking that if something like this could shake him, he still had a lot of growing up to do. He decided that this must also be a trial. He remembered the teaching of House Lordberg, that he must never lose his composure no matter the circumstance. He convinced himself that this situation was training to keep his heart steady, even when faced with such temptation. His imagination spiraled as he thought about what would happen if he made even the slightest mistake. He pictured Mariel saying she was disappointed in him, calling him the worst, asking her father to break off the engagement, and telling him never to show his face again. He imagined his own father calling him foolish and scolding him for daring to touch a girl before marriage. He even imagined the king declaring that he would never forgive him and calling it treason. Melkus thought that of course this was exactly how things would turn out. Determined, he told himself that he would overcome this trial. Mariel quietly wondered if he did not want to sleep together. Melkus replied that he intended to face this trial with everything he had. Hearing that, Mariel misunderstood completely and began blushing. She asked him if he had ever experienced something like this before. Melkus assumed she was talking about territory management and answered that he had never done anything of that sort. He admitted he was nervous, but at the same time he was excited too. Mariel took that as confirmation of what she thought he meant and commented that he was surprisingly forward. Melkus then explained that he wanted to try using the gift he had received, his origin magic, and see what kinds of things he could accomplish with it. Mariel was stunned by this, believing he meant something entirely different. She asked if he really intended to use such an insanely strong gift for something like this. Melkus insisted that it was not something like this at all, saying it was extremely important and that the village's development depended on it. Mariel agreed, saying it was indeed important. Melkus continued, telling her that this was why he had decided to use the gift's power to its fullest. Hearing that left Mariel even more shocked, and he added that he intended to crank out results like crazy. That sent Mariel spiraling out of control. Melkus went on, saying that in the Lordberg family he had been taught that power came with duty, and if he had been given such a gift, then he believed he had a duty to use it properly. Mariel asked what on earth the Lordberg family had been teaching him. Melkus said he would work hard so that his father would acknowledge him. Mariel, startled, told him not to go reporting this to his father because it would be embarrassing. Melkus took her by the shoulders and said that with the village growing, there was nothing embarrassing about any of this, and he wanted to make the villagers happy. Mariel said she understood and told him to make her truly happy as well. Melkus thought to himself that Mariel was also one of the village residents and that he wanted to show her he could make her happy. As she leaned in for a kiss, Melkus simply went to sleep. Mariel opened her eyes and saw that he had already fallen asleep. She murmured that it could not be helped, since the day had been rough, and she lay down beside him, holding his arm while wishing him good night. Melkus, fully awake, thought to himself that this was the toughest trial yet. The next morning, Melkus walked around the farmland and realized how small it was. He remembered farmers telling him that even if they expanded the fields, monsters would come and destroy everything. He thought that even if the wall solved that part, another problem still remained. Another farmer mentioned that the land and climate there were unsuitable for growing vegetables, and Melkus admitted to himself that there was nothing he could do about that either. The villagers were always suffering from hunger, and he still wanted to help them somehow. When he went outside the wall, he noticed a cart by the gate. Castor stepped out and greeted him. Melkus was shocked to see him, and Castor casually asked if he wasn't dead yet. Melkus assumed his little brother had come because he missed him. He asked if Castor had been worried and assured him he was fine. Castor was stunned by that answer, but Melkus went on, saying Mariel was doing well too, and that just that morning she had used his arm as a pillow without even asking. Castor was even more shocked and demanded to know if he had been sleeping in the same bed as the princess. Melkus mentioned that yesterday's training to keep his heart calm had been intense. Castor froze, completely misunderstanding again and imagining something entirely different had happened. Castor finally returned to the main point and said he had come with a message from their father. He explained that their father had conveyed that if Melkus truly wished to return to the house of Count Lordberg, then just this once, he would be granted special permission. Melkus was stunned to hear that his father had allowed him to come back. He immediately assumed that his father believed the training was too harsh and did not want him to force himself. In Melkus's mind, his father was so worried that he had probably lost his appetite. He even imagined Castor admitting that he missed his big brother because it had been too long since they last saw each other. Believing that both Castor and his father cared for him so deeply, he told Castor to inform their father that he could not return until he finished his training and became a fully fledged lord. Castor then questioned him, asking if the real reason he would not return to the Lordberg household was because he was enjoying his lovey-dovey, slow frontier life with the big princess. Melkus apologized, walked away, and declared that this too was another trial. He said he needed to return to his running practice and thanked Castor for coming. Castor tried to say something more but could not bring himself to speak. He went back to the cart and told the man inside that it was now his turn. From within the cart, a hooded and mysterious figure emerged. Castor flinched at the sight of him. He asked the man if he had heard what their father required him to do. The figure confirmed that he knew he did not need to kill Melkus. He only needed to break him enough so that he could no longer serve as a lord. After that, Melkus would have no choice but to return to the estate. The mysterious man left, and Castor reminded him that they were paying him good money, so he needed to handle it properly. While running, Melkus sensed something strange in the air. He realized it was poison fog and quickly used his magic to disperse it. As he wondered where the poison had come from, he stumbled over a vine. At that moment, a massive plant burst out of the ground and attempted to devour him. He recognized it as a giant carnivorous plant. The hooded man appeared and dismissed Melkus as just a brat, claiming that someone like him was no match for his magic. Melkus recognized the man as a sorcerer and understood that both the mist and the carnivorous plant had been created by him. Melkus asked if he could use plant magic and whether the fog originated from the plants as well. The hooded sorcerer answered that even if Melkus had figured it out, it would not make any difference. He then amplified the pressure of the plant, and as it nearly swallowed Melkus whole, Melkus used his physical enhancement magic to break free, destroying the plant in the process. Shocked, the sorcerer threw a handful of seeds from his bag and used magic to grow them into large, spiky vines. Melkus saw that they were plant seeds and cut through the vines effortlessly with his sword. The sorcerer tried again, throwing more seeds and attempting to activate them, but nothing grew. Confused, he wondered why the spell was not activating. Melkus explained that he had sliced every seed in midair before they could sprout. Melkus then asked if the sorcerer intended to surrender, and the sorcerer pretended he would, but immediately afterward he admitted he was only joking. He revealed that he had already scattered a huge amount of seeds in advance. A massive surge of vines erupted from the ground surrounding Melkus. At that moment, Melkus used fireball magic and incinerated every plant in sight, along with the sorcerer himself. The sorcerer collapsed to his knees, declaring that he was finished. He begged Melkus for mercy and said he would even reveal the identity of his client. He pleaded for Melkus to let him off just this once. Melkus refused, stating that there was no way he could simply be allowed to walk free after this, and that he would be coming with him. The sorcerer trembled in fear before him. The sorcerer began begging, insisting that he had no intention of attacking and had only done what he was hired to do. He pleaded for Melkus to let him go. Melkus answered that he could not allow that, and suggested they should have a nice, long conversation at his mansion instead. Though the man was called a killer, Melkus treated him with the best and most respectful hospitality he could offer. He calmly asked the sorcerer whether the client had been his father. The sorcerer panicked immediately, and Melkus knew that reaction was confirmation. In his mind, Melkus concluded that his father believed that the origin magic, the gift that allowed him to copy any magic he saw, would let him learn from a plant mage who could help the village grow. Castor was shocked, unable to believe that they had gone this far even after having Melkus exiled. Their father explained that while it appeared to be an assassination attempt on the surface, it was actually meant to be a gift. Melkus then offered the sorcerer some warm tea. The sorcerer panicked again, asking anxiously whether Melkus had laced the tea with poison or truth serum. Melkus simply laughed and said it was nothing more than sugar. He added that since the town at the foot of the region was far away, he would send the sorcerer there by carriage. The sorcerer, trembling, believed Melkus was planning to take him somewhere like a graveyard, an execution ground, or even a torture chamber. But Melkus simply sent him away in the carriage. Melkus thought to himself that he had managed to deliver the man safely, even though he had been shaking the entire time. He wondered if the sorcerer perhaps disliked the cold. Later in the forest, Melkus poured out some seeds and said he should immediately test the power he had copied from the sorcerer. He sowed wheat seeds and used plant magic to make them grow. Instantly, all the seeds sprouted at once, and Melkus was astonished by the ability. He showed the villagers the results, explaining that he had tried growing grains and vegetables with magic. The villagers were amazed, praising him and saying he was incredible. They commented that if so much could grow at once, then perhaps they could grow more plants and even full crops. Many admitted they had given up on the hopeless village environment long ago. Lily remarked that perhaps Melkus was truly a messenger of the gods. Melkus felt overjoyed seeing everyone happy. He thought privately that it was all thanks to his father's gift. Though the entire situation was a classic misunderstanding, he told everyone that they should work together to expand the fields. Timerat said that the first step was to cut down the forest trees and clear the land. Another villager complained that such work would be backbreaking and would likely take an entire month. Melkus told them to leave that part to him and used his physical enhancement ability to slice down numerous trees at once. The villagers were stunned. Timerat then stated that the next step was to dig up all the stumps and pull out the weeds. The same villager once again complained that such labor would be backbreaking and would take a whole month. Melkus told them to leave that to him as well. He used fireball magic to clear the area, and the villagers were amazed all over again. They admitted that they had hardly done any work themselves. Timothy told everyone that they could not allow their lord to do absolutely everything, and urged them to plow the land too. Everyone joined in, plowing the soil and spreading seeds. Melkus then used magic to grow and harvest them, and in a short time, a huge field had been cultivated. The villagers were overjoyed. One elderly woman said she never imagined she would see such a sight in their village. Another villager stated that they no longer had to worry about food. Seeing their excitement, Muriel recommended that they hold a harvest festival where everyone could eat vegetables until they were full. Melkus agreed, saying it was a brilliant idea, and the villagers grew even more excited. Meanwhile, at the house of Lord Berg, the sorcerer angrily confronted Zahak, saying this was not what they had agreed upon. He said Melkus was unbelievably strong. Zahak was confused, commenting that while Melkus stood out among his peers, he was not someone who should have posed such difficulty. The sorcerer shouted at him not to joke around and demanded to know what was going on with that monster. The sorcerer continued, explaining that Melkus' power, speed, and magic, everything about him, was beyond reason. Zahak only grew more confused hearing this. The sorcerer declared that this entire situation was a breach of contract, since he had been forced to fight a monster and had nearly died in the process. As compensation, he demanded 10 times the original fee, an amount that totaled 20 million gold. Zahak was horrified. The sorcerer then threatened him, saying he could always report to the royal family that Zahak had attempted to use him to dispose of Melkus. Intimidated, Zahak reluctantly surrendered the money. Furious, he blamed Melkus for forcing him to waste even more resources. Castor insisted that they could not forgive what had happened. He thought privately that Melkus was overwhelmingly strong despite supposedly having a useless gift. Zahak argued that the answer was obvious. Melkus must have been born with abnormally high parameters and had simply been hiding them all along. Castor grew angry at the accusation, saying his brother trained seriously every single day without rest, and not everything was as simple as Zahak claimed. Zahak, however, announced that he could no longer afford to hold back. With the remaining funds, he planned to send the strongest bandit gang, the Black Scorpion Bandits, to Melkus's village. He intended to order them to burn the village to the ground and make it impossible to rebuild. He stated coldly that he did not care what happened to anyone except Melkus. Castor was shocked, saying it was wrong to involve the villagers. Zahak slapped him, insisting that if they failed to bring Melkus back, the Lordberg family had no future. He explained that the strength of the Black Scorpion Bandits rivaled an entire division of the kingdom's army, and declared that this time the village was finished. Castor thought anxiously that even if his brother was strong, he could never win against opponents like that. A few days later, Zahak read the newspaper and learned that the entire Black Scorpion Bandit troop had been captured and delivered to the capital. A massive bounty had already been paid to Melkus's village. Zahak was stunned and furious, wondering what was happening and how powerful Melkus truly was. He muttered that there should have been no way an entire bandit army could be wiped out. Castor thought to himself that ever since awakening his Sword Saint gift, he had believed he had surpassed his brother. He ran out of the room in turmoil. Zahak, meanwhile, declared that he could no longer rely on anyone. He decided he would personally intervene and erase everything as if nothing had ever happened. He demonstrated his power by slicing a vase in half, acknowledging that his swordsmanship was exceptional. He reminded himself that he was the vice-captain of the Royal Knights and the bearer of the ultimate gift, Sword Saint. With that, he departed for Solari village. The reason behind the annihilation of the Black Scorpion Bandits dated back to events that took place shortly before. Back in the village, some time earlier, Timerat and the other villagers were preparing for the harvest festival and hunting monsters. They realized they had been depending on Melkus far too much. Melkus reassured them, saying they had nothing to worry about and that he would handle all dangerous monsters from that point onward. Suddenly, they heard a noise. Someone shouted that it was an enemy attack and urged everyone to rush to the village entrance. When they arrived, they saw that a bandit gang had broken through the wall and had already taken out the guards. Melkus recognized the scorpion emblem on their bodies and understood immediately. They were the Black Scorpion Bandits, the infamous group that had plundered and burned countless villages. Their leader overheard Melkus and remarked that he seemed to know quite a lot. One of the bandits added that their usual method was to steal supplies and money and then burn the residents alive afterward. They commented that while the village wall was impressive, it still looked like an easy place to burn. The adventurers refused to accept that. They said they would never allow such a thing while they were present, insisting that they would not let their lord handle all the fighting alone and that they too would protect his village. Timerat immediately lunged forward and attacked one of the bandits with his axe. The bandit caught the axe effortlessly with one hand. Timerat was stunned and asked what these people were. With a grin, the bandit explained that they had been enhanced by their boss's gift. Their leader then elaborated that his gift was engraving magic. Those engraved with his emblem suffered the lifelong drawback of never being able to disobey his commands, but in exchange, all of their abilities were enhanced several times over. The leader claimed that every subordinate bearing his emblem possessed the power to fight against a royal knight. But then they saw Melkus easily defeat several of the bandits. They shouted that he was unbelievably strong. Some of the bandits panicked and asked their boss what they should do. Melkus continued to crush bandits one after another, all by himself. The leader told his men not to concern themselves with Melkus, saying that numbers were still on their side. Instead, he ordered them to kill the villagers and beat everyone down. Melkus was horrified by the command. He realized that if he used a fireball, he would catch the villagers in the blast, leaving him uncertain about what to do. In that moment, he saw a bandit sneaking out behind Timerat. Melkus rushed in, struck the bandit, and saved him. He checked whether Timerat was all right, and Timerat thanked him with deep relief. But Timerat grew frustrated, lamenting that if only he had more power, he would not be dragging Melkus down. Just then, Melkus managed to copy the brand magic. He wondered if his origin magic could also copy magic that existed in the form of gifts. Timerat immediately asked him whether he had copied their brand magic and urged him to use it on them. Melkus hesitated, reminding him that once the mark was engraved, they would never again be able to defy his orders for the rest of their lives. Timrat said he didn't mind, because he and all the villagers intended to serve Melkis for their entire lives anyway. He stated that whether or not there were drawbacks made no difference. Timrat asked the others what they thought, and the villagers shouted that they had already decided to follow Melkis with their lives. They said Melkis had saved them, and they would be honored to serve him. They added that Melkis would never give orders that caused them suffering. Melkis was overwhelmed by their trust, but he activated the engraving magic on the adventurers and villagers. At that moment their magic surged. Their bodies felt lighter, flatter, and completely transformed. The bandits were horrified watching the sudden overflow of power. The villagers charged forward and shattered the bandits' swords with ease. Their enhanced strength allowed them to overpower the bandits without struggle. They shouted that the level of enhancement was insane. Within moments, they defeated the entire bandit force and tied them up. Melkis commented that for once, there was no need for him to intervene. The villagers immediately disagreed, insisting that they only won because he had strengthened them. They said they felt overflowing with power and thanked him sincerely for empowering them. From that point onward, they promised they would be far more dependable, and urged Melkis to take more rest now that they had the strength to support their village. They told Melkis that they all wanted to be more useful to him. Melkis was taken aback, but he smiled and said he understood, adding that he would be counting on all of them. The villagers were delighted to hear that. A few days later, they all struggled because their weapons had become damaged. Timrat laughed when another adventurer asked if he had bent his axe again. Timrat admitted that it was because, thanks to his lord, he had become too strong and could no longer control his own power. The other adventurer remarked that the axe was made of steel, so it was bound to break right away. Melkis happened to be out on a walk as the adventurers resumed their training. He quietly thought that everyone in this village had grown incredibly strong. The village had endured crisis after crisis until now. Meanwhile, Melkis' father Zahak was on his way to Soldari village, intending to show his power to everyone. Melkis wondered to himself that if anyone tried to attack this village now, he might actually feel a little sorry for them. He also questioned what fate awaited his father. Soon, the harvest festival arrived in Soldari village. The villagers enjoyed themselves as they ate the delicious vegetables grown by Melkis. They eagerly went back for more plates and continued having fun. One lady commented that Melkis usually ate more luxurious food, but Melkis denied it, saying this tasted far better than anything served at the mansion. Mariel agreed, claiming it was tastier than palace cuisine and that it even had the princess seal of approval. The villagers were thrilled to hear this, and Mariel happily fed Melkis with her own hand. Everyone was having a wonderful time. Melkis recalled the sixth teaching of the Lordberg family: one must cherish their bonds with others. At that moment, he felt he had finally understood that lesson. As the enjoyable night deepened at his mansion, Mariel was on top of him, saying they should do something befitting a fiancé. Melkis, overwhelmed by desire, said he could not believe such an outrageous dream. Mariel told him it was reality. She asked if he thought it was too convenient and questioned whether he was happy with the situation. Melkis admitted that no man would be unhappy being invited by a cute girl like her. Mariel was startled by his compliment, and in that moment, she noticed that little Melkis had risen as well. Melkis tried to explain that it was not what it looked like. Mariel now understood that he was happy too. He desperately tried to calm himself, telling her to wait a moment. In Mariel's mind, he was simply the fiancé chosen by her parents, and she believed she was only helping him with the trial of patience imposed by his father. But this was a misunderstanding. Melkis wondered why she was being so forward. He thought he had completely misread things and assumed Mariel was simply fulfilling her duties as a royal daughter. He believed she was brave and wonderful, and everything suddenly made sense to him. Confident that he was not making any mistakes, he told Mariel that he respected her well as a princess, which was precisely why he wanted them to wait. Gently patting her head, he said there was no need to rush and that they should wait at least until they were officially married. Mariel said she understood, but in excitement, she immediately tried to pull his pants down. Melkis quickly pulled them back up, and Mariel stared at him with a lustful gaze. Melkis wondered how things had come to this, and said that this behavior could not be explained by princess duties. That was when he concluded that Mariel was actually a super lewd girl who would be fine with any guy. Mariel slapped him off the bed, saying it was fine if he had misunderstandings, but that assumption was completely different. She burst into tears, and Melkis told her he was relieved that she had not done such things with anyone else. He admitted it might be selfish of him, since they were only engaged and not officially married yet, but he did not want Mariel sleeping in bed with other men or crossing that line. Mariel hugged him tightly, saying that for that day, she would forgive all of his misunderstandings. Melkis wondered why her mood had suddenly shifted. The next day, Zahak arrived at Soldari village. He entered easily, since the guard mistook him for an old tourist. As he walked, he muttered to himself that he was none other than Sir Zahak, vice captain of the kingdom's knight order and bearer of the title Sword Saint, and that he would personally show these villagers something spectacular. Inside the village, a child was practicing with a sword, declaring that he would someday become a strong man like Melkus. Each swing released shockwaves, and Timurat laughed, saying the boy's shockwaves were laughable. The kid insisted he was still just a child and only at a playful level for now, but that he would have to become stronger from this point onward. All the villagers had been enhanced by Melkus, and because of that, their entire sense of normality had warped. Zahak approached, remarking that the training ground looked shabby. He noticed the men training and assumed they were the village adventurers, then stated that he would take them on. He attempted to strike them with his sword, but Timurat stopped the attack with just a finger. Timurat told Zahak he could not do that and reminded him that practice weapons had to be used because it would be dangerous otherwise. Zahak suddenly found his sword replaced by a wooden one and demanded to know what had happened. Timurat calmly explained that he had swapped Zahak's sword for a practice one while he had blinked. He added that it was normal to close the distance during an opponent's blink. The other villagers nodded, saying that of course, that much was expected. Zahak was stunned. Timurat asked if Zahak had come for sword training and said he would join him in practice. Zahak insisted he must have made a mistake earlier and launched another strike. This time he used his swift sword technique, the fastest strike among all his moves, a technique only the captain of the kingdom's knight order had ever blocked on the first attempt. Timurat, however, blocked it easily with his axe. Zahak was shocked, claiming it was impossible. Timurat, impressed by the speed and power, said he now understood the old man's true identity. Zahak assumed Timurat had figured it out and announced that he was the vice commander of the Royal Knights. But Timurat said the old man was merely a novice with a sword. Zahak grew irritated, demanding to know whom Timurat was calling a novice. Timurat continued blocking every strike with ease, encouraging Zahak by saying he had good spirit and should keep it up. He added that spirit was the most important element in swordsmanship, since form and technique could be learned afterward. Zahak finally said he had no choice. Believing it too dangerous to use against humans, he decided to show them anyway. He activated his talent, shocking everyone around him. He told them to behold the strongest combat gift that benefited only his clan. Timurat observed that Zahak's gift caused the sword to shine, while the kid exclaimed that it looked cool. Zahak grew even angrier, saying he could not tolerate this any further. As he swung repeatedly, Timurat acknowledged that the sword's power had increased a little, though to the villagers, the enhancement was practically negligible. Another villager walked up behind Zahak, telling him that what he was doing was not good because he was gripping the sword too tightly. He took Zahak's hand and said he needed to hold the sword more gently. He reassured him that it was fine since everyone started as a beginner and it was natural to not get things right immediately. He could learn little by little. Zahak felt embarrassed. Then the village kid stepped forward and said they should have a match. Zahak, frustrated, began swinging at the boy, accusing him of being full of himself, but the kid effortlessly blocked all of Zahak's strikes. The boy then asked whether those sword skills of Zahak's were supposed to be amazing. Timurat told the kid that the old man was obviously holding back, since no adult would ever go all out against a child. He then instructed Zahak to lower his stance, while another villager pointed out that Zahak's grip had become too intense again. They all encouraged him, saying they needed to work hard and improve together. Humiliated, Zahak ran away, leaving the villagers staring at one another in confusion. One of them commented that Timurat's teaching style was far too strict for him. Timurat, however, insisted he had been teaching gently and carefully, wondering aloud if he had done something wrong again. Melkus arrived and asked if something had happened. Timurat explained that a strange middle-aged man had visited, saying he had come all the way to learn sportsmanship, but had suddenly left to go back. Melkus said he hoped his own father could visit the village someday as well. One adventurer asked what kind of person Melkus' father was. Timurat added that Zahak was the former lord of the village, but since he had always relied on a steward, Timurat had never met him personally. Melkus described his father as a great man who always maintained his composure and possessed a generous heart. He said his father was kind to children and never lost his temper or took out his frustrations on people or things. One villager remarked that he sounded like an amazing person, and Timurat said he hoped to meet him at least once. Meanwhile, at Zahak's mansion, Zahak threw his furniture in frustration. He wondered what on earth was happening in that village. A shadowy figure watched from the darkness, smiling at the scene. Zahak was overwhelmed with frustration, feeling as though he was at a constant disadvantage no matter how he tried. He blamed Melkus for draining his finances, though it was a baseless accusation. They had simply budgeted under the assumption that Melkus would marry into the royal family. He refused to let Castor continue in the Knight's Order because Castor had slacked off in his training and could not be presented in public. But now he saw Castor training seriously. Castor was striking a dummy, loudly insisting that winning once with a sword did not make him superior to his brother. He then began studying, determined to surpass Melkus. Zahak had no idea why Castor had suddenly become so motivated. Even so, he remained worried about his funds, saying he had already fired most of the maids. Now only one option remained, and he struggled with the decision, wondering if he needed to give up the mansion itself. Back in the village, Melkus thought to himself that it had been a long time since he had visited the royal capital. He wished he could greet his father, but he was still in the middle of his trial. When he approached the capital, he saw Zahak and Castor moving away from their mansion. He wondered why that was and questioned whether it was because the trial required money, forcing Zahak to sell the mansion. This time, Melkus' assumption was correct. Shocked, he ran off, thinking his father had gone too far for his sake. He told himself that this was not the time to rely on anyone. He vowed that he would meet his father's expectations and prove himself worthy. Zahak, without realizing it, had only ignited Melkus' determination even further. At Soldari village, Mariel welcomed Melkus back and asked him what day it was. Melkus replied that it was her birthday, and he handed her a bouquet of flowers while congratulating her on turning 15. Mariel happily said he was correct, and she was delighted that he remembered her love for sunflowers. Melkus said he naturally remembered, and added that he had remembered something else as well. He then gave her a sunflower beret. Mariel was overjoyed and thanked him, saying she would treasure them in a vault as a natural treasure. Melkus quickly told her not to say that. She explained that the flower would eventually wither, and she wished she could keep it forever. Then she asked Melkus to put the beret on her immediately. Melkus suggested it would be better to ask a maid, since he was not used to doing such things, but Mariel refused and issued it as a royal command, saying he had to do it. Melkus agreed and asked her if attaching it around that spot would make it look the cutest. Mariel began blushing, and Melkus, misunderstanding, thought she was angry because she disliked the placement. He felt confident that he was actually good at understanding a maiden's heart. After placing the beret on her, Mariel thanked him. Melkus told her that if she liked it, he could do this every day. Mariel was surprised and told him to be careful with his words, since every day extended 10 or even 20 years into the future. She asked if he had that level of determination. Melkus said he did not mind, because once he got used to it, it would take less than a minute. Mariel said she understood and declared that from that day onward, even when she became a grandma, he would have to put her beret on every day. Melkus wondered to himself if it was not more likely that Mariel would grow tired of it over time. As she aged, her design preferences would surely change. Just then, a maid arrived and informed Mariel that the gift appraiser had arrived. That day, 15-year-old Mariel finally received her gift. The appraisal results revealed that Lady Mariel's gift was the Dimensional Warehouse. Melkus noted that it was one of the extremely rare and famous gifts, a power that opened a gateway to another dimension and allowed items to be stored inside. It was a highly useful gift for both battle and trade. Mariel activated her gift and said it was amazing because it seemed anything could be placed inside the dimensional hole, and she had heard that the storage capacity varied depending on the user. She began storing pieces of furniture inside. Melkus asked whether it was uncomfortable, but Mariel assured him it was not. She showed him the hourglass she had placed inside at the beginning and pointed out that hardly any sand had fallen. Melkus realized that time stopped inside the dimensional warehouse, and there were endless ways to make use of that. Suddenly, Mariel remembered that she wanted to preserve the flowers forever. A smile appeared on her face, and when Melkus asked what was wrong, she replied that she had just received a truly wonderful gift. Melkus agreed. Meanwhile, at the new Count Lordberg family mansion, Zahak declared that he would never forgive Melkus and that he would crush him along with the villagers. Castor asked whether he was not going to bring his brother back, but Zahak's objective had shifted completely in his anger. Zahak said that he had rushed in recklessly and had failed, so he was now out of options. At that moment, a shadowy voice said it had heard enough of Zahak's story. From within the darkness, a horned man in a suit stepped out. Zahak saw the blue skin, the horns, and the sinister aura, and he immediately recognized the figure as a demon. The man confirmed it and introduced himself as Demon Humphrey Boosin. Castor protested, saying the demon tribe was supposed to be extinct since the ancient war. Wusun confirmed that as well, explaining that 300 years ago, they had waged a great war against humanity and lost. But despite that defeat, the survivors have continued steadily advancing their plan. When Zahak asked what plan he meant, the demon explained that their goal was to overthrow humanity and seize dominion over the world as the demon race.